Hey, it's Mark A. Altman.
And this is Darren Docterman.
And this is Ashley Miller.
And we are
Inglorious
the Inglorious
Treksperts. Well, Ashley, you screwed that one up again. I did okay.
I don't say Inglorious. I say Inglorious, and everyone says Treksperts.
You say Inglorious, we say Trekspert.
I say no, you say Survivors. No. Survivors.
I'm not playing that game.
I'm not going there either. Thank you, Darren. I'm glad we have an adult on this show.
Okay. Yeah.
When they show up, I'll let you know.
So you may recall that we were in Ticonderoga for Trekconderoga, and then we proceeded on the next leg of our journey. Any higher, and my ears will pop, Mr. Bond. We went on the next leg of our journey to Oklahoma City. Of course, this was no easy trip either because we left Albany fairly late, connected in Atlanta, didn't have a huge turnaround time, and then headed on our way to Oklahoma City, where we were greeted by the Uber driver from hell who proceeded to warn us that tornadoes were going to kill us and that downtown Oklahoma City was extremely dangerous and we should be very, very careful. And it was not the Department of Tourism.
No, it was not.
I mean, don't get me wrong. She was lovely, wasn't she, guys?
Oh, no, she was a sweetheart.
She was just concerned for our safety as swaddling babes fresh from Los Angeles.
But it was kind of ridiculous, wasn't it? I mean, first of all, tornadoes were nowhere near us.
Well, that's not necessarily true. There were a lot of tornadoes to the south of us.
They can decide to be wherever the hell they decide.
We were lucky. We were very lucky that they didn't come farther north.
That's right.
That's all I'm saying.
And then you know, downtown is not dangerous. I'm from New York. It wasn't dangerous.
Well, it's all graded on a sliding scale.
I would have been happy to walk around downtown at night.
Well, next time you can do that.
Get the exercise.
See what happens.
Well, I'm sure we'll be back because, man, that was a great convention. GalaxyCon hit another one out of the park with this their inaugural Oklahoma City convention. It was great. People had a great time. We had a great time. We had some amazing panels. And again, it was terrific because literally from the second we arrived at the convention, it was just nonstop Treksperts fans. I mean, I forgive me if I don't mention a few of the people because I wasn't keeping notes, but it was great to see Mike and his brother, Mike from Austin, his brother again, who was terrific because, of course, he had heard about the Heritage auction on this very show. And then he went out and spent a great deal of money to buy a bunch of stills at the Greg Jean auction and then brought these binders full of stills. And it was absolutely mesmerizing to all of us, including Scott Mance, who was there. And but then to make it even better, he said, "Take some. I want you to take some of these stills." And we did. I'm not one to say no to a gift. And I'm so happy because they're all stills that I love and cherish, and I'm so happy to have.
It's an amazing collection of stills. Greg had perhaps the largest. See, I'm choked up. The largest collection of Star Trek stills and slides of anyone. Paramount would go to him when they needed slides for their calendars, and he had amassed these over, basically 60 years. And some amazing black and white, incredibly sharp photos from the show that some we'd never seen before, others we'd seen, but in much worse condition. These were all pristine and amazing.
Well, we didn't even talk about when we were at James Cawley's place all the great stuff he had in his collection too, stills and props and costumes. And that's a whole nother conversation. When we have him on the show, we'll talk more about that. But Mike and his brother, these were the guys, in case you forgot, I love this story. They heard our episode on Con the Musical, and they heard it was playing for one more week. So they decided they would fly from Austin to New York to go see it on our recommendation. So they went to see it and they loved it.
Crazy.
And
That's just crazy.
So that's the stuff we love hearing those stories.
Yeah.
I love hearing those stories. And another one of my favorite listeners was there, Woodrow Wilson Wagner, who also discovered us in Austin, and he came bearing gifts. He brought us these beautiful from his the school where he teaches. He brought
University
us
of Houston,
pads.
Victoria. Yep.
Yeah. And all this stuff. He said
bags with swag.
Bags
it
of
was
swag.
terrific. I ended up using it on the plane. It was great, and it had water bottles and all kinds of stuff. He said he was trying to get us an honorary degree. So,
and what? That was my question.
I what bullshit? That's what.
Yeah. Well, I've already got that one.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It'd be a BS in Treks in Star Trek, in Trekication. So. No. I'm not going to sell that, huh? No. Because I got my doctorate in Trekication, dude. I'm a PhD in Trekication.
It would be an EDD in Trekication if you're educating. Now I'm going to be a pedantic asshole. I'm the pedantic expert.
Yeah, you're an ED in Trekication.
You're not pedantic, Ashley. You're just
in those there's just such a fine line.
But Woodrow always sends us such thoughtful things. He's the guy that I met at the LBJ Museum who told us, "Oh, I loved your panels. I hope I'm not bothering you."
That's Lyndon Baines Johnson, just to be clear.
But he's great. He also he tasked us, but we're not going to get into that. When he started asking us questions during our writers panel, trying to get us to say something we'd regret.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't take that bait.
We didn't take the bait.
We made things go.
We ended the panel rather than answer questions that would have made us say things we would regret.
That's right.
Because we're all about celebrating love.
Put them in their bodies.
Yeah. And of course, coming from New Jersey with his wife was Jason Oken, who also brought us some really nice gifts too.
Yeah. No, it was actually. I think that Oklahoma was probably, in terms of people coming to visit us, I think we saw more people than we have seen than on any of the cons that we have attended. I think, and we had fairly steady traffic,
a steady stream of actual fans who had listened to the show, which is
it was a lot, and I regret that I didn't write down everyone's name, so I apologize.
It's your fault.
We're not mentioning you, but these are the ones I remember off the top of my head. We also met some future listeners. It was funny. The Becca, two girls named Becca.
That's like a cop show.
As the two Daxes. One was dressed as Terry and one was dressed as Nicole. And,
which is weird because Terry and Nicole were both there.
Well, they loved Terry and Nicole's panel so much, which we did on the first day of the convention, that they said, "Oh, they're now going to become, listeners of the podcast," because they thought we did such a great job with that. So that was nice, and they were lovely, and it was nice to get to talk to them. And I signed so many books, and I was particularly grateful. And I don't remember the gentleman's name who had me sign my Deep Space Nine #0, Terok Nor, because that's my favorite comic book that I ever did. And I was so happy to be able to sign that. And in fact, I was so appreciative that I turned to Terry Farrell and I said, "Do me a favor. Can you sign this for him too? Because I love that he brought me this comic and I want it to have even more value to him." So she signed it, which was, obviously Terry's the best. We love Terry.
Yeah.
And we can't wait to hit the road with her as we embark on our documentary, To Boldly Go. And if you have not yet supported To Boldly Go, please go to makethetrek.com, because we hit the road very soon. And we've done some preliminary photography.
Shooting has begun.
Yeah. And so we're going to be
and it will continue until morale improves.
We're going to do a lot more over the next year. So now's the time to get on board with it if you haven't already.
Like the Great Space Coaster.
Like the Great Space Coaster.
That's right.
So, but I got to say, this was our first time interviewing George Takei, and it was not disappointing. And I was really glad that we got a chance to talk to him, because obviously he's someone who really, I think, has a lot of memories of doing the show, a lot of great stories, that he hasn't told, some that he has told. And to Daren's credit, Daren just made the show. He had the greatest idea in the world. He came to us and said, I have an idea. What was that idea, Daren?
George Takei is famous for a cut made in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. The cut was in the scene where our main crew is headed in a travel pod to the Enterprise to inspect the Enterprise for Spock's trainee crew. And the scene, as it was written, was longer and featured, as you'll hear, an additional bit of dialogue that was very meaningful to George Takei. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity, much like Shatner had on the Tonight Show, I believe, to redo his death scene. I thought, well, this might be a nice way to let George Takei share this scene that he was so enthusiastic about.
Yeah, and it was interesting because we're like, should we tell him? And it was kind of like, maybe, like he might not. We thought it'd be better to bring it up naturally, particularly if the interview was going well. Yep. And fortunately, things were going really well, and so we decided to go for it. And he was delighted to do it. Obviously, he needed his glasses, so I ran to get them from his husband, and I said, from one Altman to another. Here you go. And they look just like the glasses. The glasses that Kirk had in Star Trek 4. So, he said, "Oh, thank you for this." And the beauty is they will be again. But he then proceeded to read with Daren the scene from Star Trek 2, and we also queued up.
We're not going to spoil it for you.
Okay, we're not going to spoil it.
No, we're not going to spoil it because you'll hear it.
You'll hear it soon enough.
I didn't say what it was about.
But George was a terrific interview. He had great stories. Everything I said, I meant. You'll hear what when I talk about. I give him a lot of credit for a lot of things, and it was it was really it was really great for us because there's you don't know how many times you're going to get to spend time with some of these people, and we were so pleased when the interview was over and we're backstage together, that Brad and George were just gushing over it. Just like, that was so great. What a great panel. We just arrived here, and what a great way to start the convention. And thank you so much. And then how did you get the script? How did you get those pages?
Where did you get this power?
We're the Treksperts, I said. We're the Treksperts, George. Of course we can get anything. You want credits? I got them for you. But
he was very pleased, and that made us feel so good because we want the people that we interview to feel that, because that's what makes it all
Darren,
worthwhile.
It's what you said. These actors, these people have given us so much joy over the years, and they can never experience what we feel about Star Trek.
Right.
So when we can at least do a panel that's different than what they've done 1,000 times before, and give them.
And you'll notice we try not to ask the same questions they've had to answer thousands of times. Yeah. We try to go in different directions. Mark is great at that, for bringing up things that they never talk about, and it's really fun to see them open up because of that.
We work really hard to make it sound like we're pulling it out of our ass.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because I joke that we don't prepare for these things, and that's not entirely true. We do give it some thought, and I think we've been preparing our whole lives for these panels.
We have.
That's the
so it's not true when I say that we don't prepare at all, that we make it look effortless, because we do prepare to a certain extent, in that we do think about it.
We don't prepare for wraparounds.
That's why they're a disaster.
Not at all. That we do not. So anyway, before we pat ourselves on the back too much, let's share this incredible interview with George Takei, which is coming up right after these commercial messages, and then we'll be back with a few closing thoughts. I'm Mark A. Altman, showrunner Pandora, writer-producer for the Librarians, and co-host of Inglorious Treksperts. I'm here with my fellow Treksperts, the associate producer of the Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition, Darren Dochterman, and the writer of Thor and X-Men First Class and co-host of Inglorious Treksperts, Ashley Edward Miller.
Whatever you've heard, it's all lies.
And today, we are so delighted. We've never had the honor and the joy of interviewing our next guest. You all know him very, very well. He truly is a man who needs no introduction. It's George Takei.
Suddenly it's silent.
We want to ask you.
Well, first of all, I want to say good morning and thank you all very much. This is my first time back here in Oklahoma City since I remember they had built a memorial to all the people who perished in the Alfred P. Murrah building. The chairs that were lined up. It was very moving, but even before that, I was here shortly after the horrific bombing, where there was just a chain link fence around the site. And I was so touched by these stuffed animals that had been tied onto the chain link fence, because there was a kindergarten, as I'm told, in the building. 19 children perished, together with over 150 people there. Extremism is terrorism, and it was a horrible thing that happened. And I do remember my 2 visits here, which dealt with, or which was memorable because of the tragedy of the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building. But this is a happier occasion.
Hopefully,
all
yeah.
together, gathering together to celebrate a show that is still young, 58 years young, and we have more children now. All the spin-offs are not only our children, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And this is such a blessing because of all of you, those of you that supported Star Trek when we first came on, who became very devoted, absolutely relentless in your support of Star Trek. And just like the series, we had spin-offs and spin-offs and spin-offs. Now you're not only their next generation, but children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I recognize the original fans here. It's easy to tell. There you are, right in the front row. Thank you very much. And you have a lot of generations that followed you. Thank you very much for your incredible. We had the Vulcan greeting on Star Trek, live long and prosper. Well, we have lived long and prospered together. So for that, thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
Walter, I wanted to ask you, in 1967, you made a movie, The Green Berets, with John Wayne, who was the biggest movie star.
Did you say 67?
68. 66.
Lower.
65.
When did Star Trek first begin?
66.
That's right.
And you did it on the hiatus.
During the hiatus between the first and second season. That was in the 60s, not 50s.
I didn't say 66. 67.
67.
The hiatus between 67 and the second season.
Going once.
So my question for you is this. John Wayne was probably the biggest movie star in the world at the time. Politically, the complete antithesis of yourself. How was that relationship? Because you have some wonderful scenes together, and you're terrific. Obviously, he's a magnetic presence, whatever we think of his politics. But what was that experience like for you? Obviously, it's a huge budget, Warner Brothers 7 Arts at the time. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience was and your impressions of the Duke?
Well, I was a John Wayne fan from when I was a child. And when my agent told me that he wanted to interview me for his upcoming picture, The Green Berets, about the Vietnam War, I was both thrilled and apprehensive. Thrilled because it was John Wayne. I remember seeing his great big close-up in Fort Apache and how he squinted at Ward Bond. I mean, he was, a giant in motion pictures. And he wanted to see me in person for this upcoming movie, The Green Berets. I walked in with a decision that I've made. It's about the Vietnam War. He was a supporter, a passionate supporter of the Vietnam War, and I was active in the peace movement. We had a Hollywood peace organization called Entertainment Industry for Peace and Justice, EIPJ, and so I worked together with people like Jane Fonda and David Sutherland, other actors like that. I was going to be interviewed by a passionate supporter of the Vietnam War. I had a decision to make. That decision was, I'm going to be honest with him. I am a strong supporter of peace in Vietnam, and I decided I'm going to confess to him that we are on opposite ends on that war. I walked in and sat down, shook hands, and I saw that same giant close-up, his squinting at Ward Bond, but he was squinting at me. I knew he was suspicious. And I said, Mr. Wayne, I mean, you don't call John Wayne John when you first meet him. I said, Mr. Wayne, I'm very honored to meet you in person like this, and because I respect you and the integrity of your position, I have to tell you that I'm on the opposite end of the Vietnam War. I am a member of the EIPJ, which is in Hollywood known as the Hollywood Peace Organization, and we are working just as passionately as you are in supporting the war. We are working to end the war and get peace in Vietnam. There was silence. I said, well, I said my piece. It's up to him. I waited. He kept squinting at me, that Ward Bond squint. And so that made me feel pretty good. He sees me like Ward Bond. And then he said, you know what, George? I respect you too. And I think I have to honor you for your integrity in being forthright with me. And let me tell you, what I want for this role is the best actor I can find. I'll be interviewing a few others, and we'll let you know. But I want you to know that you have my respect for being so forthright. I walked out of there thinking, I'm not going to get the part. The next day, my agent called me and said, George, you're cast in Green Berets. And my respect for John Wayne grew even more. He cast me despite the fact that I would be spending the money that he was going to be paying me to support the peace movement. And working with him was an unbelievable experience. he was not supposed to be the director. The press release said Mervyn LeRoy was to be the director. And I'd worked with Mervyn LeRoy in another film, The Majority of One, with Alec Guinness and Rosalind Russell. And so I was prepared to work with Mervyn LeRoy. Mervyn was there. He sat in the canvas seat for him, but on the set, giving orders and whispering with the cameraman and pointing things out, was John Wayne. John Wayne took over the director's job. He was a takeover kind of guy. And when we were ready to work, we had a script. I forget the name of the writer, but he was making up the scene. He said, David Jansen was also in that. David, you're seated there, and you say your line, and you get up and go there. And George, say such and such, and go there, and then say, seated, this line, and then I'll walk out. That wasn't in the script at all. We had to memorize the new lines right there on the set at Fort Benning. Thank God it was Fort Benning. When they said on location, I thought, good Lord. Do I want to go there? Fortunately, it was at Fort Benning where they had built a Vietnam village set. And so there in Georgia, we were filming The Green Berets. And John Wayne is a big star in every way. He took over the directing job, the writing job, and the producer's job as well, because the man who was given the credit for producing was Michael Wayne, his son. Mm-hmm. So you know who was doing the producing as well.
Yeah.
John Wayne is a takeover guy.
Yeah. It's such a great cast. You mentioned David Jansen, Aldo Ray is in it, Jim Hutton's in it. Great ensemble. What people may not realize after you told that story about that, giving you lines on the day and changing things, was the reason that you missed so many episodes of the second season of Star Trek, because Green Berets went on and on. It was a quagmire, to steal a phrase.
Literally a quagmire, because we started shooting one scene outdoors, and it started to rain. And John Wayne said, all right, we can't shoot in the rain. We'll stop filming. The prediction is it's going to be over in a week. And so we all went to our bungalows there in, what's that town right by Fort Benning? Columbus, Georgia. And it came, the rain came, and it continued, and then it got more intense, and then it became a drenching rain. A week passed, and it was still raining, and it continued to rain. We were supposed to be back on the set by then. It went on for literally, it felt like 40 days and 40 nights. We got way behind schedule. And so John Wayne said, I'm going to be decisive. We're going to make that a rain scene. And so we slogged through the mud, drenching wet, and we couldn't run because it was too difficult to run. And so we slogged through that. But 2 days into the shoot, it stopped. Bright sunshine, but we had mud all over. The set was all wet. And so he decided, all right, we're going to continue filming as a rain scene in bright sunshine. And so before every shot, we had to be doused with buckets of water so that we'd be drenching wet. They would wet down the set, and about a half a dozen prop people would stand out of camera range with garden hoses, faking rain. And we went way over schedule. And that's how I missed out on about 4 episodes of Star Trek, the second season.
But you got to be a captain. You were Captain Nim in Green Berets.
Even before Starfleet made me a captain.
Well, before that, you had such a you've had this amazing career as a voiceover artist. For decades. People may not realize you got your start doing voiceovers. I think it was on Rodan and Godzilla, dubbing Godzilla and Rodan back in the day. And of course, your voiceover career continues to this day. Can you tell us a little bit about getting your start in voiceovers, and if that's a different muscle, what do you get out of it that you don't necessarily get, on camera, but just you've had so much success in the voiceover arena, ever since those early days dubbing those Japanese kaiju movies.
Well, I got my career inspiration way before I was getting paid. I spent 4 years of my childhood in American imprisonment camps because of the Second World War. As you know, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, which began the United States' involvement in the Second World War. And we're Japanese Americans. We're Americans, but we look just like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And the nation went crazy, hysterical, totally irrational. My parents couldn't walk down the sidewalk without cars passing by, yelling at them, calling them filthy names, calling them spies and saboteurs. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. But just because we looked like this, the racists were yelling at us. And then the graffiti started to pop up. Japanese American-owned businesses got graffitied. My father's car had 3 letters painted on it in red paint, JAP, that venomous hate word. And then the government got stampeded by that kind of racism. They came down with a curfew. All Japanese Americans had to be home by 8 p.m. and stay home until 6 a.m. That was okay with me. I was 5 years old, so, we were in bed. But if any Japanese American were caught outside at night, they were arrested and thrown into jail with no evidence, no charge, nothing, simply because we looked like this and they were breaking a stupid curfew. And then my father went to the bank the next morning and to make a deposit, and the bank account was frozen. Frozen means the money's gone. The government took what we had in the bank. Some families lost their entire life savings just because of racism and war hysteria. And then even the President of the United States got stampeded by all that hysteria, and on February 19th signed Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, from Seattle all the way down to the Mexican border, to be rounded up with no charge, no trial, no due process, no evidence and no facts other than that we looked like this. And they categorized us as enemy alien. We weren't aliens. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. My father was a San Franciscan. That's the U.S. My siblings and I, the 3 of us, were born in Los Angeles. That's the U.S. But they categorized us as alien, and to top it all, enemy. All Japanese Americans were enemy aliens simply because we looked like this. and we were put in barbed wire prison camps. However, in camp, there were black tar paper barracks that we had to live in. I went to school in a black tar paper barrack, and the teacher on the first day said, "I'm going to teach you the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag." And she pointed to the flag at the head of our class, and she said, "We will begin every day in the morning with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag." So I remember 5-year-old me standing on my 2 feet by my desk with my hand over my chest saying, "With liberty and justice for all." But right outside my schoolhouse window, I could see the barbed wire fence and the sentry tower and the machine guns pointed down at us. But in addition to those outrages, every other month, after dinner in the mess hall, they showed movies, old Hollywood movies. I remember seeing Charles Lawton in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was a fantastic actor. I really was moved by the anguish of this hunchback. But occasionally they showed Japanese movies that had been imported before the war. And some of them were samurai movies. And they either were silent movies or they had lost a soundtrack. When they showed those movies, they had a man who, say there's a screen there, and to the left-hand bottom, seated at a table, and the table had empty coconut shells and other iron triangles dangling, and pipes and all that. And when the sword fight began, he had a boy there running the pipe through the triangles, the clang, clang, clang. And when the horses, samurai on horses came, the coconut shells became the horse hooves. But the man who sat with him either had memorized the dialogue, he had a script in front of him, but he was looking at this screen, and he synchronized with the Japanese actor's lip movement. And I still remember how fascinating that was. There'd be a scene between the shogun, the great lord, and his samurai, the warrior, and beside him was a princess. And the shogun, the great lord, would say, and the samurai would say, "Ha, so de gozaimasu." And the princess would go, "Ma, osoroshii koto." All these voices coming from one man seated right there beside the screen. I was riveted on him more than on the movie on the screen. And when the movie was over, I said, "Daddy, my father was with me. I said, "Daddy, that man was like a magician." And he said, "No, in Japan, they have narrators like this at kabuki and other performances, and they're called benshi." I memorized that name because it was that word, because it was such a fascinating thing for me. And then after we got nothing from the outside world in imprisonment, no newspapers, no radio, nothing. When we were released at the end of the war, my father bought a little portable radio for us. And then my world expanded. Gangbusters, Manhattan, New York City, sirens going, all sounds, and the whole drama being played out by voice actors, or westerns, horses clopping, and I was used to the sound of horses clopping because I heard the coconut shells being, and the cowboys would come galloping, and I saw westerns, or I heard westerns. So that was all voice acting, radio acting. That's where I became fascinated by the potential for just the human voice to dramatize, to move you, to take you from a barbed wire prison camp to ancient Japan, samurai period, or from my portable radio, gangbusters, or B-Bar-B and the Western, or the B-Bar-B Riders on radio. So I got my inspiration as a child from voice actors who opened up a new audible world for me by their voices.
Well, I have to, going back to the internment camps, you shined a light more than anyone on such a dark chapter in American history, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention you had your Broadway play, which you wrote and starred in, graphic novels, children's books, all bringing this history to people who maybe weren't aware or were, but couldn't understand, and you brought your unique experience to a much broader world. And that's so important, because when people don't know history, the fact that you used your stature and your stardom to bring this, because it's not just writing about it in your memoir, you have continued to make this something that people understand and can empathize and be horrified by. And I think that is just a remarkable thing that you've done with your stardom, and the fact that you continue to talk about it and that you're not bitter about it, but you're saying it so people, this doesn't happen again. And we've seen the dangers of this, and I think it's just remarkable. And George, I think that's an incredible legacy.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
I know you had another star that you wanted to ask George about.
Yes, on a much lighter note. Now, John Wayne and the Green Berets is not the only experience you've had with a major star and a war movie. What I've been dying to ask you about is Which Way to the Front with Jerry Lewis.
Well, it took some, what's the word? My father wanted me to be an architect. And I did start my college life as an architecture student up at UC Berkeley. But as I told you, from the time I was a child, I was fascinated by acting. I wanted to be an actor. It was voice acting that first introduced me to the power as well as the magic of voice acting. But I had discussions with my father, and he said, "Yeah, being interested in theater and movies and motion pictures and television enriches your life, and so that's good." But I used to drop hints to my father that that might be an interesting way to make a living. He said, "No, that's culture, and it's good to have culture in your life, but even white actors don't work all the time. In fact, very few actors make it a career. It's a tough road, and so I think architecture is much more stable. It'll be much more satisfying for you, and I think he also had his own agenda. He was in real estate by that time. And I think he pictured putting up a sign, Takei and Son Real Estate Development, and I would design the projects, he would develop them and sell them. And so that was, he never said that, but I think that's what he had in mind. So as a good son, I began my college studies as an architecture major. But after the second semester, I came back to Los Angeles from Berkeley, and there was an ad in the Japanese American press for some producer casting Japanese voices. What's a Japanese voice? You have a white voice? Your hair and mustache is or beard is white.
I'm not so sure about that.
It sounds like a white voice to me. But this producer was looking for Japanese voices. My father saw that ad, and so he said, "You're a ham. Why don't you? You don't have a summer job. Yeah, look into that." So I found out about it, auditioned, and I got cast. It was dubbing in Japanese voices to a Japanese sci-fi monster movie called Rodan, a prehistoric monster that gets released by radiation and terrorizes the massive hordes of Tokyo. And this producer was importing that film and wanted to dub in English dialogue to the actors speaking in Japanese. And I auditioned for it. And as my father said, I was a ham, so I knew how to scream like the terrified hordes of Tokyo. And I got cast, and they hired either 4 or 5 actors. I can't remember. One of them was Key Luke, the Chinese-American actor, and he was impressive. I noticed how he took some words, he broke up into 2 sounds, and he'd take a breath where the actor kind of seemed to break, and then finish with the second syllable of that word. And so by watching these others who worked with me, I was able to do, I think, a half a dozen voices on Rodan. If you should ever see that on TV on the late night, listen for my young voice.
That's an extremely difficult skill.
Yeah, but I did it, and it worked, and it was fun. And I even helped the writer find a word. There was one scene where the police captain is bawling out one of his underlings, and he says in Japanese, "Bakayaro," stupid fool, you know. And the writers couldn't find any English word that fit that lip movement, "Bakayaro." And the director asked the cast to take a crack at it, and I watched that scene. It's on a loop, so you see it over and over again. And I watched that lip movement, and I said to the director, "I think I have a possibility, and let me try it." And the loop came, and when the captain started to speak, I said, "Banana oil." It fit. Banana oil for Bakayaro.
Well, George, I know a source of much consternation for you over the years was the scene in Star Trek II which announced your captaincy, and that was never.
You read my autobiography.
Well, you know we did, but I have good news for you.
For those of you that don't know, it's called To the Stars. It was published in 1994.
But we just happen to have the scene right here. We have sides for you, so you can finally tell everyone about.
How did you get this?
We have our ways.
I'm going to have to put my glasses on. That's fine.
Brad, I need my glasses.
Hurry, Brad. He's about to get a promotion.
My reading glasses.
Okay. From one Altman to another, let me get your glasses.
Quickly, Brad, there are thousands of lives at stake.
Thank you.
We even have the music for the scene, and we're going to set the stage, and it's going to be wonderful. And finally, your promotion will be made in history. There's your glasses right there.
George, here you go.
He's going off a book.
Thank you. They're a gift from Brad Altman. They will be again. That's the beauty of it.
It's been decades since I looked at this line, or lines.
So we're going to start with scene 29 in interior space shuttle. I'll read the screen directions and any other characters that may be in there, but we would love for you to read your lines when they come up. Here we go. Everyone ready? Ready. Okay. Here we go. A new composite. Holmes, Sulu, Uhura, and Kirk, who sits reading. Through the windows, we can see the approach to the Starship Enterprise. Kirk looks up, nods. Sulu activates a comm button.
Enterprise, this is Admiral Kirk's party on final approach.
Enterprise welcomes you. Prepare for docking. Kirk looks up from his book as Sulu sits next to him. I really must thank you.
I am delighted. Any chance to go aboard the Enterprise, however briefly, is always an excuse for nostalgia.
I cut your new orders personally. By the end of the month, you'll have your first command, USS Excelsior.
Thank you, sir. I've looked forward to this for a long time.
You've earned it, but I'm still grateful to have you at the helm for 3 weeks. I don't believe these kids can steer.
Ladies and gentlemen.
The captain of the Excelsior.
We have a time for just a few questions, so if you want to line up at the mic, we know you must have a lot of questions.
Please, no fisticuffs.
How
as
did
get
you
to the
dig
microphone.
this up?
We
Bill
found a
had
way.
built every page of this script.
We found a way.
You have magical ways.
That's why we're the Treksperts. Go ahead.
Hi there. I just want to know, when you're signing autographs for fans, like, what is the most common quote that gets requested, and if you could deliver it for us.
A common quote that they ask. A common quote is, there's so many unique ones. They're either children asking for their fathers. The father was a big fan, and my mind's a blank now.
I think he may be trolling for that Howard Stern quote that you're immortalized for.
Thank you for that hint. Oh my. I was thinking of what the children want for their fathers, who was the big fan, and it's both the daughter and son asking for them.
My question is, outside of Star Trek, what's your favorite role, and is there any chance you'll ever return to Star Trek?
For the latter part of your question, it's hardly likely. Some of you may have seen me walking with a cane. I don't walk like I used to. I don't sound like I used to. If it's of Admiral Sulu in retirement, speaking nostalgically about his youth, then I can be cast.
I bet if we put a sword in your hand, you would remember.
If you're trying to get me to take my shirt off, forget that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi. This is less of a question and more of a thank you. The very first Star Trek convention I went to was in Oklahoma City. at a hotel. I was maybe 18, 19 years old, and it was the weekend following when Gene Roddenberry died. And you were there, and you didn't sign autographs, but you shook hands with everybody as they left, and what a first experience, what a very personal, and I wanted to thank you for your professionalism in showing up and, continuing to be able to share the love that we all had when it was a very difficult time for you. And it's been a lot of years, but thank you.
Thank you for remembering that. I remember that convention well, too. And as you said, I initially wanted to cancel. I mean, all of us, beyond the Roddenberry family, the members of the cast were grief-stricken. He was the one that created this incredible phenomenon, and it was already a phenomenon by then. It was to grow even larger, but and Gene personally became a very dear and beloved friend, and so it was very painful to consider coming to a convention where it's a joyous occasion, people coming together and celebrating Star Trek and the memory of Roddenberry would have just filled me with grief. But I phoned a couple of friends, and the organizers said that was Adam Malin. It was a creation convention, and he suggested that I do the convention as a tribute. And I thought maybe that might be an even more positive way rather than staying home and grieving. And I came here, and he was so right, because it wasn't just us that were grieving. The fans who had never met him, who had never worked with him, who had never shared friendship with him, were grieving just as much. And it was an opportunity for all of us to come together, and rather than my just talking, and you might have noticed I love talking, I shared the mic with the people there, and to listen to their memories of Gene helped make that convention not only memorable, but a renewal of Gene Roddenberry's spirit. Thank you for remembering that.
Hi, George. My question is about your appearance on The Twilight Zone. I think you're fantastic in it. It's a small set, you and one other actor the entire episode. You really ratchet up the intensity. My question is, where was the line between George the entertainer and George the person when you portrayed that character? Because his actions are very different from the actions that you and your family took. The character realizes his father was a traitor, for example. Was that difficult for you? Would you have portrayed the ending of that episode any differently if you had more creative control?
I have mixed feelings about that episode. It was, as an actor, very fulfilling. It was a rich, raw, red meat acting opportunity for me to sink my teeth into. And it's Rod Serling's show. It wasn't written by him, but it was science fiction. And yes, it was a different story of the same impact from the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But I did it because it was also science fiction. There was one episode that had Bill Shatner on the wings of a flying plane talking to a passenger through the window. I mean, it's science fiction, you know, not science. It was just anti-science fiction. And that's the kind of show it was. And it certainly wasn't my family's experience. It was fantasy fiction. And yet, it was still too close to the end of the Second World War for other Japanese Americans. And we have a Japanese American civil rights organization, sort of like the NAACP, but this is called the Japanese American Citizens League, JACL. And they protested the show because it defamed Japanese Americans, the interpretation. It was science fiction, totally unbelievable. And yet it touched a raw nerve for many Japanese Americans, and their protest pushed CBS to cancel any further airing of that episode. So throughout the run of Twilight Zone, it was never repeated. And only when videos started coming out was it available again for fans to see. And so I want to emphasize that was science fiction, not the truth. It was fantastical. The character that I played visualized his father signaling the Japanese planes to go that way to hit Pearl Harbor. Absolute fantasy, and it was Twilight Zone. It was fiction. And that was a measure of the sensitivity and the horrible impact Pearl Harbor had on so many Japanese Americans.
Well, I'm afraid we only have time for one more question, but George will be at his booth, so it's a good time for anybody who didn't get to ask a question to talk to him, get his autograph. And I want to remind you at the very end, if you haven't been at a GalaxyCon before, and chances are you haven't, since this is the first one in Oklahoma City, they do a group selfie, so they would want you to come to the front and by the bottom of the stage, and George will be standing there and take a giant picture of everyone. So last question.
Yeah, your voice work tends to run a really high range of very silly roles like Adventure Time, and then more recently, very serious roles like Arakawa in the Like a Dragon video game. Do you have a preference, or is it fun to just have that really high range and go from being a gangster to being a weird talking heart?
Well, have you seen Blue-Eyed Samurai?
No, I don't think I've seen that yet.
Some of you saw it. Not too many. Thank you, those of you that clapped. That was another fulfilling role. One of the lords in this kingdom during the samurai period of Japanese history. So yes, I've had a wonderful range from sci-fi to historic fantasy. And voice acting, as I said a little bit earlier, is drama created by voice, but now it's drawings and the combination of voice acting and the drawings. And I must say, Blue-Eyed Samurai was beautifully drawn. Some of them are like Japanese prints, block prints that are very artful, and now we have that as animated storytelling of samurai period. I enjoyed doing that very much, and I'm sorry you haven't got it yet. It is going to be rerun. And the other speaker mentioned my books. I have a new children's picture book that just came out earlier this month. It's called My Lost Freedom, and it's my childhood imprisonment in American concentration camps told from a child's vantage point. In 2019, my graphic memoir of that, which is targeting the teenage generation, came out called They Called Us Enemy. As I said in my talk, the enemy was totally irrational and totally racist.
Well, we're happy to call you friend. What? We're happy to call you friend.
What a treat this has been.
And thank you so much.
Live long and prosper.
As Mark said before, this is the first time we've gotten to interview you. Maybe next time we do this, you can have your answers longer and more thought out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, everybody.
Remember, come forward for the selfie. Please, no stage diving. No stage diving.
Well, we're back. Oh my, that was.
I found that delightful.
Oh my.
I did too. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed spending time with George. And I meant it when I said that what he's done in terms of shining a light on what happened to Japanese Americans during World War I is truly the greatest.
It was the sequel.
What did I say?
You
oh
said
my God!
one.
I said what George Takei did during shining a light on what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II. I'm really tired. We've done all of these raps. Jesus, World War I, yeah. What he did for people who flew biplanes in World War I, what he did for people who Japanese Americans who were interned in World War II. It's so important because people know less and less about history and American history, and it is truly his greatest contribution, more so than Sulu, more so than anything. And it's a testament to him that, and I said this, that he's not bitter. He just wants to make sure that people know about what happened to people like him, people who looked like him, people who were descendants of Japanese ancestry. And I think that's extraordinary. Also, I thought it was very classy of him to open by talking about the Oklahoma bombing. And if I have one regret about this trip, and I've said this to the guys, I really, really wanted to go to the Oklahoma, the memorial of the Morrow Federal Building where the bombing took place. And my plan had been to go there on Monday. And unfortunately,
just didn't have time.
Our flight left a little earlier than I thought. And we had a convention. We met up with some people from the convention that we needed to see. And so I wasn't able to go, but I absolutely am planning next year when we hopefully go back to visit that site because it's extraordinary.
On the panel, the look on George's face when he saw that script and hadn't obviously seen it for 45 years, 40 years, he was elated, and his smile was so broad, even for George, that it was so great.
It's difficult to describe. I mean, it is rare that you see joy that pure on someone's face and surprise. I mean, boys, we got him. And Darren, all my hats off to you. And Mark, to your point about George's perspective, I was very impressed by that, and I was impressed by his seriousness and his point of view in terms of how he talked about his experiences, whether it was discussing, the visiting Oklahoma just within weeks of the bombing, or after Gene's death, or what happened with the internment camps, or his meeting with John Wayne. All these things that you heard him talk about just now on that interview. I was really impressed with his seriousness, his thoughtfulness in talking about it. And there is one other thing. I mean, I think I speak for all of us when I say if we had any anxiety about that interview, other than getting on stage with somebody like George, who means so much to us, I think George has a reputation for going after Shatner, and obviously we have great love for Bill Shatner here, and I was so happy that we had nothing to be anxious about. The man had not one negative word about anyone or anything came out of his mouth. That was just such a purely joyous experience to be on stage with him, and just it was relentlessly positive from beginning to end, even in the context of the opening on the Oklahoma City bombings. It just, you don't encounter somebody like that very often.
Well, I have to say, in the interest of keeping it real on this podcast, that some of you are probably thinking right now, what hypocrites, because in the past we've been critical of George Takei, and that comes from solely from his criticism of Bill Shatner. Now, some of you would say that's his truth, and you have every right to feel that way. But as people who know Bill very well and who've worked with him and literally do not have a bad word to say about him, that's our truth. And we love Bill. We respect Bill. And Bill was the star of the show. We've all worked with stars, and we've all worked with people who maybe resent the star because they got the better lines and the better part and the better this and the better. George has nothing to be ashamed of. His performance in the Green Berets is great. George, I've seen him in other movies. He's terrific. He's an amazingly talented voiceover artist. He's an extraordinary person. And if I had one piece of advice for George, it's to let the feud go. He's doing no one any favors. And to be honest, it is something that we talked about. If he goes after Shatner on stage, what would we do? And the reality is we would have said something.
Yep.
I did it with Walter and Ticonderoga.
Yep.
And I would have done it again. And it got a little heated, but I will not, to a point, I'm just not going to let people make Shatner their punching bag. And not because I know him. He's a friend.
Yeah. And that scene is one of the main kindling points of that anger.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a reasonable way to maybe diffuse some of that anger and some of that fear that George had from that time.
And ironically, the argument with I think argument is overblowing it, but I think your exchange with Walter, let's put it that way,
right?
When we were in Ticonderoga, was specifically about that scene.
Yep.
And I feel like that is the discussion afterwards, because Darren wasn't there to see that in real time. But we discuss all the stuff when it happens to us, and I feel like that discussion is probably what teed up the thought of that scene.
Entirely.
So having that engagement with Walter over that negative experience led to this very positive and I think possibly even healing experience on stage a week later.
Hope so.
It's a great point. And I know that George's feeling, and he's always espoused, is that Shatner tanked the scene. But I think when you hear it, you realize it wasn't Shatner. It wasn't George. There is some clumsy writing that any of us, if we were cutting that film, would have cut the lines in exercise and nostalgia. If we were Harv Bennett and hadn't decided on what Star Trek 3 was going to be, we weren't going to write ourselves into a corner by saying that George
is going to be
promoted to captain. Particularly there was some very heated negotiations between George and Harv Bennett. I think if he has any issues, it should be with Harv and not with Bill.
Yeah, Bill didn't have the final cut on that movie.
Yeah.
Or even the first cut on that movie.
Bill just wanted to get back to the set of TJ Hooker. So
and who wouldn't?
Yeah. Anyway,
he's got some hoods to jump on.
But this was delightful. George could not have been more gracious. He was terrific. He was a terrific guest. We had a great time with him, and I hope you had a great time listening to this episode. And of course, if you like these kind of hard hitting interviews and fun that we're having here on the Treksperts, you don't want to miss 4 days of Inglorious Treksperts programming at Trek to Vegas this August, where all three of us will be bringing you 4 full days of Inglorious Treksperts Entertainment on the Inglorious Treksperts stage in the DeForest Kelly Theater at the Rio. So we hope you'll join us. You can find out more at creationent.com. Of course, we'll be in San Jose at GalaxyCon. You don't want to miss that. That's going to be an incredible Star Trek event in San Jose. And of course, we'll both, Darren will be splitting up when Darren's in Raleigh, North Carolina. We'll be in San Diego, California for Comic-Con. A lot of great Inglorious Treksperts goodness coming up. So we hope we'll see you at one or all of these amazing events. But until then, you can share the conversation on Discord or your favorite social channel. We hope you'll rate us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts, and join us next Thursday for an all-new episode of Inglorious Treksperts. Until then, on behalf of Ashley Edward Miller, Darren Docterman, myself, Mark A. Altman, keep on trekking ingloriously, of course. Engage.